This episode of Paranormal Heart is brought to you by Nodakian Studios. If you're looking for a fine piece of stoneware pottery, check out Nodakian Studios at nodakianstudios.com, as well as on Facebook, where she periodically gives away pieces of pottery. Again, check out Nodakian Studios at nodakianstudios.com.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward, along with a special segment, Oddities with John Mallard.
Welcome back, folks, to Paranormal Heart. Bienvenue tout le monde. You can find us on the second and last Sunday of each month on Podbean and YouTube. You can also find us on sparkradionet.org, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Podchaser, and anywhere you find fine podcasts. If you enjoy the show, please show your support by telling others about us. And hit that like button, share, subscribe, and follow. This episode's shout-out goes to my listeners in Ireland. I hope you're all doing well, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. In episode 41, I'm joined by another interesting guest. He's a nationally award-winning journalist. He has written about the commercial satellite and space industries for over 30 years. He currently is a freelance journalist in the Washington, D.C. area. He has reported from 4 continents and is the winner of the prestigious Newsletter Publishers Association Award for breaking news. He also earned 3 other NPA reporting awards. He's also an accomplished ghostwriter and has edited personal finance economic newsletters and regional anthologies on the paranormal. He has gone from a skeptic to a believer of the paranormal after experiencing things he could just not explain and had to admit that perhaps there's something to the paranormal after all. He shares those interesting experiences with us. I introduce to you Mr. Dave Brose. Hello, Dave. Welcome to Paranormal Heart.
Kat, it's my pleasure to be on your show. I've looked forward to this for so long, and I'm very honored to be able to be considered to be a guest, so thank you.
Well, thank you. The honor is mine as well. I know we've been talking about this for a while, and it's finally here. I thought before we got into your paranormal experiences, you could give us a little bit about your background and then how you got into the paranormal.
Well, I am a professional journalist. I've been professional writer, covering the science and space and satellite communities for about 30 years now. So I'm pretty much an expert, if you will, on anything that's space and science, NASA, satellite related, satellite TV, satellite radio, you name it. I have both an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in journalism and in covering government. And I've always been interested and had a friendly ear to the paranormal, but I will tell you that it wasn't until I had direct experiences myself with what I would consider to be paranormal events that I became much more interested in the field, and I would define myself as a hobbyist. Mm-hmm. And in my community, which is the space and satellite community, it's a high-tech community that's driven by science and data and facts that can be tested and proven. To believe in the paranormal is not to be accepted by that community. They, believe in evidence, and if you can't produce evidence, then it doesn't exist until it happens to you. And then when it happens to you, a whole other world opens up to you, and that's kind of been my experience moving through the decades.
Almost like an awakening or an epiphany.
Yeah, well, yeah, an awakening, a revelation,
yes,
an eye-opening. You have to open your mind as well as your eyes to this as well, because you can deny what you're experiencing. it's especially if you come from a science background like myself and a journalistic background like myself, where you have to report the facts. You cannot make things up. That's considered fraud. Even though we know in a lot of journalism that is going on, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
People are making things up out of whole cloth. But I'm old school. I was trained 30 years ago, and so I approach journalism from a more old school way. And you don't make things up, and you just report what you see as it happens. And I'll tell you, I've had some doozy of some experiences, some whoppers that have opened my eyes. That's all I can say.
I really love hearing people who have a scientific background, a journalistic background. I have another friend who was actually a guest. He was a clinical psychologist, Stan Wanglin, and he, at one point kind of dismissed the paranormal until he had experiences himself that he couldn't really explain. So this really fascinates me.
Well, I have found that. Let's see. I don't want to sound egotistical here, but I have found that when I'm sharing my stories coming from me, a journalist and somebody with a science background, somehow with people it tends to have like increased credibility. Not that I should automatically be granted that credibility. I shouldn't. Everything that I say should be tested and either accepted or doubted on its face. But because I do come from a rigorous journalism training and a science background, somehow I think people give me lend me more credibility in their eyes.
Yeah, that happens an awful lot. It's almost like we know you're not going to make things up.
Right, exactly. And let me say this. I desperately wanted to continue to deny what my eyes and ears and nose was experiencing.
Because of your background, yeah.
Some of these events. Believe me, I wanted to bias myself against this, even though I was witnessing it with my own eyes and my ears and my sense of smell. And I just couldn't. I mean, it gets to a point where you can't deny it, or you're acting like a crazy person if you do. That's crazy.
Well,
especially when it happens, when it repeats and repeats. That it's just there comes a point in one's arc of knowledge, arc of acceptance, where you just have to say, this is happening. I can't explain it, but this is definitely happening, and I can't deny it.
I think when someone has an experience where they can't explain things, what distinguishes them from being crazy and sane is how they react to what they just experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So please go on, tell us everything.
All right. Well, I'll share some of my stories, and
sure.
And as God is my witness, and I am a God-fearing and God-believing person. I am a spiritual person. What I'm about to tell you is the truth, and all of these things did happen to me, which changed my life in this respect. In that I went from a non-believer to an open-minded potential believer, which for me was a very big deal because I was very closed-minded about the paranormal. I joked about it, made fun of it, teased people who teased people in a fun way, not in a cruel way, but teased people who had said they saw this or experienced that. And of course, it never happened to me. And if it doesn't happen to you, it's hard to cross that bridge and to believe. And I understand that. So for those who are listening to your show right now, who have not had an experience and they doubt what I'm about to say, I believe them and I understand them because I was there. And, perhaps one day these things will happen to them and they too will have potentially a change of paranormal heart. How's that?
Oh, I like that. That was smooth.
Well, there you go. And I didn't even practice, I promise. So all of my experiences began when I was well into adulthood. I had never had an experience as a child or in my 20s or even through my 30s. But just into my 40s, I started having these experiences for for no reason. There was no precipitating event. There was no life-changing event. There was no trauma. There was nothing. It just happened in due course of living. That all of a sudden I started having these experiences that I couldn't understand, and they started small, and then they built larger. So, let's see. The very first one, which blew my mind, occurred, and then these things, now that I've done, research and listened to other paranormal programs and watched things on TV and done a lot of reading, I tend to see that there are situations and certain scenarios that are more prone to maybe being exposed to the paranormal than others. And this one revolved around renovating a home. So I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in the mountains of Maryland. I live not too far from Camp David, Maryland, this presidential weekend retreat that the president flies up to on the weekend. It was made famous in the late 1970s with the Camp David Middle Eastern peace accords that were negotiated at Camp David up here where I live. And I had a friend who lived in downtown Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, right near the big Capitol Dome, the famous white dome, Congress. And he lived in the neighborhood behind there, and he had just bought an old townhouse. This was a house that formerly was deeded after the United States Civil War. A lot of former slaves were given homes as part of the what's that called? As a make good for being slaves, as part of the Reformation, Reconstruction. And these houses stayed in these families for generations, for 100 years. And as the real estate market in Washington exploded during the 1990s and all the way through today, gentrification happened, like is happening in many cities across the country and in Canada as well. Oh, by the way, I know that I'm not sure when you're going to be airing this, but I do want to wish people Happy Canada Day.
Oh, thank you.
Even though this could be airing, many days later, but just since today is Canada Day.
It is, yes.
Canada Day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, my friend had purchased this old home that was uninhabitable. It had fallen in disrepair. It was a row house, a townhouse on Capitol Hill, and he and his friend were slowly working to rebuild the house, refurbish the house inside. And his friend that he was working with, that was helping him, who was a contractor, met an untimely death of cancer, totally unrelated to the work that they were doing in the house, blah, blah, blah. So, I said to my friend, well, how can I help you? How can I help out? Because, he was in the middle of the project. And it had gotten to the point where he could move in. My friend Jeff could move in and live in this house. It had been approved, but there were still a lot of finishing touches that needed to be done, etc. And I said, let me come and help you on the weekends. I'll drive down from Maryland into DC and spend the weekend, and we'll just work inside and out in the yard and everything. I just love to do that. He said, sure, let's do it. So one weekend I went there, and we were busy working. We were doing finishing touches, painting and some light carpentry and doing baseboards and rooms and things. And so I was spending the weekend there. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse, so I had, he put me up in the guest room, and it was great. So we're working. It's a Saturday night. We're working. We get all done. I'm exhausted. He goes to sleep. He's got 2 dogs, by the way. German Shepherd Wolf mix.
Oh.
Golden Retriever Wolf mix.
Wow.
2 half wolves. Mm-hmm. They were rescues. The sweetest girls, the sweetest dogs you'd ever know. I mean, just unbelievable. So, just as that as the background, because they're going to come up a little bit later. So, go to bed, and he's in his master bedroom. I'm in the guest room, and I'm sleeping. And in the middle of the night, the ceiling fan turns on by itself. And this is the type of ceiling fan that has those frosted globes that look like, that might be at your grandma's house.
Oh, yes.
The globes look like flowers. They're like fluted, and they're usually frosted. There were 4 of them that, hung below the blades. I'm sleeping. It's got to be about 3 in the morning, 3:15 in the morning. And all of a sudden, boom, the lights come on below the ceiling fan, and the ceiling fan goes from 0, meaning it's turned off, to high speed.
Wow.
And it woke me up because, you're feeling wind on you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have this blazing, blaring light on in the middle of the night. It's pitch black. And I'm like, well, that's strange. I don't know how that happened. So I get up, and on the end table in his guest room, he had the remote control for the ceiling fan. So, it was a modern ceiling fan. It was one that could be, had an RF, a radio frequency clicker to turn it on and off. This wasn't some, ceiling fan from the 1970s. It was a new fan that he and his friend, the late contractor, had installed. So I get up and I grab the clicker and I shut it off. I shut the fan off, I shut the lights off, and I go back to bed. Finally fall asleep. An hour later, boom, fan on, 4 lights on, blaring down on me. I said, wow, this is really strange. So I knew that on the wall by the door, there was the switch, a manual switch, a circuit switch. Like you would turn a light when you walk out in the room, you have a light switch, you flick it on.
Yes.
So in this house, the light switches were very old-fashioned. I don't know if they're like this in Canada, but very, very old homes didn't have a switch that you grabbed and lifted up and down. It had push buttons.
I was envisioning that. Yes, we used to have those here.
Okay, good. So they had decided to keep them as a relic to the past, as a feature of the reconditioned home. I thought that was really neat, actually. So I went to the wall and I pushed the button, the old manual clinky clunk.
Yeah.
And it goes in a circular metal button, and I clicked it off. Now, this is important to know. When you click that button off at the wall, it shuts the circuit off. It prevents the electricity from reaching the fan, the motor. The motor can't turn on. The lights cannot turn on because you've interrupted the circuit in the wall. That's what a light switch does. So I went and I said, I don't know what's going on. There must be a short in that fan that this is happening, and he's going to have to get this checked. So I went to the wall and I pushed the plunger button in, which shut everything off in the room. No light, no fan, nothing. It couldn't turn on. And the clicker then was rendered useless because it was shut off at the wall. Well, you know where this is going.
Yes.
So I went back to bed. A half hour later, boom, lights on, fan on high. Now, by the laws of physics and science, by Einsteinian physics, that cannot happen. That is impossible to happen. But it did, and I witnessed it with my own eyes, and the feel of the wind on my skin, blowing wind on my skin. So I saw it, and I felt it. 2 of my 5 senses. Well, I freaked out. I'm like, this can't happen. There has to be a short in this somewhere, and that when I pushed that plunger in, I really didn't break the circuit. It must be so old that it's broken. So I just left. I unscrewed the light bulbs because it was too late to wake anybody, to wake my friend up in the house in his room. So I didn't want to make a scene because I felt like I was going crazy. So I stood on the bed and unscrewed the lights one at a time. It took forever because they were so hot. And I got them off, and I just left the fan on because there's no way to shut it off. I just left the fan on, which was fine. The next morning when I woke up, of course, the fan was still going. The plunger in the wall, the light switch was still in the off position. And, it was daylight. I went downstairs and I said, you have to come up here. Come and look at this. And I said, has this ever happened to you in your room or in this room or any other room? Do you know of this? And I explained what happened. I showed him the fan was still going. And I showed him that the switch was in the off position. And he looked at me and he had no He had no clue. He said, I've never seen that before. And I said, I know, neither have I. I said, but I think that you need to get an electrician in here to take a look at this, because I'm sure you must have a short.
Like anyone with any ounce of intelligence would do.
Would do, exactly. And, to his great credit, he agreed. And he got an electrician the next week to come in. The electrician brought all of his testing equipment in. They can test the lines by touching them with meters and things like that.
Yep.
Everything was installed correctly by electrical code, by modern electrical code, by the contractor that my friend was working with, who had since passed. And the electrician said, "There's nothing wrong with this light switch. It works." And I asked my friend, I said, "Did you tell him that in the off position the fan still went on?" He said, "Yeah, he thought I was crazy."
Yeah.
He didn't believe me. He said the electrician didn't believe me. And I said, "Well, I don't know what to tell you, but you saw it with your own eyes. The fan was still going in the morning. You saw the punker was in the off position, and you saw me freaking out."
Yeah.
This journalist of science freaking out. And what I mean by freaking out, I mean, being incredulous as to how this could happen.
Yes.
It's just bothering me. But I don't know, we just kind of left it. And, what are you going to do? The electrician validated that everything was fine. The fan then was off. Everything seemed to be working fine, and everything was good. So on to the next story. The next time I go over to his house, a couple weeks later, on the weekend, to continue to help him. We're working on a Friday night, blah, 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 doing everything. And it's fine. Have some pizza at the end of the night, go to bed. Wake up the next morning, and we need to run to the hardware store to get some supplies. Whatever we needed. I don't even remember what it was. Paintbrushes and rollers and, all kinds of stuff. And so we leave his two dogs, his two girls, the half wolves, half shepherd mixes, in the house, as we would always do. And we puppy-proof the house. And these dogs love to get into the garbage can.
Yeah.
And he had one of these garbage cans that had in his kitchen that looked like it was from an old-fashioned 1950s diner. Kind of was all metal. It looked like R2-D2.
Yeah,
the robot from Star
I love
Wars,
those.
Where it's round on the top and it's metallic, and it has that door that swivels back and forth, back and forth. You push it and you put your garbage in, and then it swings, ding, 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 ding. And it looks like R2-D2. And we would take that garbage can and we would put it up on his kitchen table before we left. Because the dogs would get in it.
Yeah.
They just loved it. So if it was up on the table, they would leave it alone. So we did that. We puppy-proofed the house, and out we went for 2 hours around lunchtime in downtown Washington, D.C., doing shopping at local hardware stores and getting supplies. So, are you ready to have your mind blown?
Yes.
We get back 2 hours, so now it's like 2 p.m. on a sunny Saturday in the summer. We get back, we open the door, and every single cabinet and drawer in his kitchen was open and fully extended. All the kitchen cabinets, all the dishwasher door, all of where he kept his utensils and his cooking tools, his plates, his cups and saucers, everything was open. And the garbage can that was on the kitchen table had been moved from the kitchen to his living room. And the lid of the garbage can, the top of the R2-D2, the robot, the round part on the top that swiveled back and forth, that was dislodged, taken off of the can itself, and was laying next to the can in an upright position.
Wow. And
the dogs were nowhere to be seen. They were upstairs in the bedrooms. They always greeted us at the door when we came in. It was mayhem when we got home, because they were going to get treats and they knew it and they were just so excited.
Yeah.
They were upstairs. I turned to Jeff and I said, "Does somebody have a key to your house?" And I said, "Before we do anything, let's check all the doors." He only had a front and back door. Because remember, this is a row house. So there was one entrance in the back and one entrance in the front. Two entrances in the back, excuse me, a basement entrance and the main floor, and then the front door. And we knew the front door was locked because we had to use our keys to get in. He had to use his key to get in. So that left only two doors that we needed to check. The main level door on the opposite end of the house and the basement door. All of them were closed and locked, completely locked, deadbolt locks. No neighbor, no family member had a key to his house. His family members didn't live anywhere near Washington, D.C. So he, they would have no occasion to come to his house, without letting him know.
Right.
So all the doors were sealed shut, tight, locked. No neighbor or family member had a key. The front door, we needed to use our own key to get in. Yet
I take it you checked all the windows as well?
All the windows. They were all locked. Deadbolted locked. Because this is Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill.
Yep.
The neighborhood was changing for the better, but, it was not considered necessarily a crime-free neighborhood. This is an urban neighborhood in a neighborhood that was changing for the better, so you kept everything locked, including the windows. In fact, on his main level, that would be the street level, his downstairs windows had wrought iron bars on them, as many homes in the United States do.
Yep.
In formerly high crime areas.
You read my mind again. I was going to ask that.
Oh, perfect. So those were all secure and they were not loose or anything. They were firmly there. I looked at him and he looked at me and he's like, "Whoa, what is going on?" Now let me tell you about this garbage can. There were a number of times where I told him, "Hey, I'm going to take your garbage out back, put it in the dumpster, or in your garbage can outside for garbage pickup, and change the liner in the can." I've got to tell you, I'm no weakling, but I'm no super buff guy either. I had so much trouble prying that lid off that garbage can. It was a really tight fit, which is great. That's a good quality garbage can. That's great. You'd have to really, really push that round top on, and it would snap on. And you want to make sure your fingers were out of the way because you could get a pinch. This is a metal, steel, shiny steel diner type garbage can. It was so difficult to pry that lid off that garbage can. Let me tell you, I could not believe that the lid was off the garbage. Nothing had been spilled. The garbage can was off the table and in another room, upright, completely sanitary and clean.
Yeah.
With the lid pried off, sitting next to the garbage can. I turned to him and I said, "Your girls," his dogs, I said, "your girls didn't do this because dogs do not have opposing thumbs."
No.
And they cannot pry off a garbage can. They have to use their mouth. And I said, so they didn't do it. And if they did, they would have tore through the can, because there were a couple times where we forgot to put the can up. And they had their fun in the house, let me assure you.
Yeah, I had a dog that used to love the garbage too. Oh.
Yeah, garbage everywhere.
Yeah.
So I know that they didn't do this, and the fact that they were upstairs in the bedroom and didn't meet us at the door was very strange. And every cabinet, the dishwasher door, all the drawers, all pulled out. That was weird. I mean, we just looked at each other. I said, "Jeff, there's no explanation for this. Either somebody came in and broke into your house, and there's no evidence of that anywhere. All the doors are locked. They're deadbolt locks. They have to be locked from the inside. They're all locked. And your front door was clearly locked, including the deadbolt, because we had to use your two sets of keys to get in for the regular door lock and then the deadbolt."
Yep.
He looked at me. He goes, "Wow." I said, I think something's going on here. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think something's going on. So it got quiet again, and we worked the rest of that day. We kind of not really forgot about it, but you just kind of put it in the back of your head, because if you don't, you become paralyzed.
Yeah, you just kind of dismiss it.
You become obsessed with thinking about it because you're trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Because there's got to be an explanation, right? And so you just put it in the back of your head because you've got a job to do. And we're working. So that same weekend, the next morning, Sunday morning, he's in his bathroom showering, and I'm up already. and I hear a knock at his front door. He didn't have a doorbell because, like I said, this was a 100-year-old house, and he elected not to install a doorbell. He wanted to keep it, a knock door, like the original door, and which I thought was kind of neat. And I heard the door knock, dum, 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 dum. And he was in the shower, so I just bounded down the stairs like a gazelle to open, to answer the door, and there was no one there. Now, that's not that strange. That can happen.
Yep.
I didn't get down there fast enough and somebody walked away, or, perhaps I thought I heard the door knock and it didn't, or whatever. So I bounded down the stairs. I opened the door. There's no one there. Naturally, I stick my head out the door to look left and right, thinking maybe I can catch the person who might be, walking down the sidewalk already. Nobody there. Now, here we go. As I stuck my head out the door, in my right ear, directly next to the wooden door frame, if you can visualize this, you stick your head out a door, and your eyes, dart out further than the frame of the door, but your ear is even with the frame of the door.
Yes.
Because you're looking left and right. In my right ear, as God is my witness, I heard the knock. Knock, 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 knock.
Wow.
In the wood.
Yeah.
In the wood. Now, using your sense of hearing, that you can detect distance using your sense of hearing. And you know what a distant knock is, like a knock in another room, versus a knock on the door, versus a knock directly next to your ear. This was directly next to my ear.
Must have been loud.
It was loud.
Yeah.
And it was right there. And you can tell it's right there because it's not as if somebody was knocking on the kitchen door in the back. It's right to your ear. And you hear it. So much so that you turn your head and you look at the door and you look at the frame of the wood and you go, what? And so you immediately I'm like, old house. Maybe it's a rodent. Maybe he has a rodent infestation. Maybe something got in his drywall and has burrowed through. But, then I hear this. And
that's not a rodent.
That's not a rodent.
No. Or it's a big one.
Right. If it's a rodent, the rodent has a hand.
Yeah.
And rodents don't have hands. Nor do possums, nor do rats, nor do cats. Not alley cats, not city cats. This was not a rodent.
Yeah.
Now at this point, I slam the door. Because I'm scared. I slam the door and I bound up the stairs and I start pounding on his shower door. I'm like, get out of the shower. I've got to tell you a story.
Oh my God. He must have been like, what are you doing?
He's like, you are crazy.
Yeah.
You are losing it. I said, I'm not losing it. I know what I'm experiencing. I know what's happening. And believe me, I'm the first one to debunk this. I am the first one to make fun of this. I am the first one to laugh at this. And I said, but these things are happening. I said, Jeff, we got to call one of these cable ghost shows. We got to get him out here because this place is haunted. And finally, I said to him, listen, are you telling me the truth that you've had no experiences here when you're here by yourself and I'm not here? Or is this only happening when I'm here? I said, come clean, because I'm starting to think like, I'm possessed or something. Like I'm causing this. And he said, well, now
here
that
we
you
go.
asked,
Yeah. Oh.
and he starts relaying things to me. Like he came down the stairs one morning and he turned the corner in his row house to the landing on his first floor. So he's going from the second floor down the stairs. At the very bottom, it turns 45 degrees and boom, you're in the hallway. And that hallway looked, if you turn to the left, that was the front door. And if you turn to the right, you went to the kitchen. You walked down the hallway. Just think of a long, thin house. You turn to the right, you go to the kitchen. And if you went straight, not left to the front door, not right to the kitchen, but straight, you'd be in what was the living room where we found that garbage can. Well, he had his contractor friend who had passed had installed these very stylish, very nice looking, very long marble shelves from cut marble.
Nice.
They were kind of jagged edge. They weren't finely finished. They weren't right angle squares. They would look like pieces of, marble cut out from a quarry, long and thin. He told me one day he came downstairs This is like a weekday to go to work, like a Tuesday morning. He's coming down to feed the dogs, make his coffee, and get ready to get out of the house. And he turned the corner, and every single knickknack, photograph, statuette, piece of memorabilia that were on those 2 marble shelves that were horizontally mounted on the wall were turned around facing the wall.
Wow.
And he said that happened multiple times. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you know about this house? Then he finally comes clean with me. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Here is the pièce de résistance. Here is the coup de grace. It turns out that the family that he had purchased this townhome from, in other words, the last owners and last residents of that townhome, the last person to occupy the house died in the house.
Oh, wow.
In the bedroom that I was sleeping in.
No.
Yeah, his name was Mr. Green. I called him Mr. Green Jeans. Mr. Green died in that house of natural cause, of old age.
Yeah.
We could all be so lucky, right?
Yeah.
So he died a peaceful death in the house. He was the last living person in that home. When he died, his heirs, his family, put the house up for sale, and my friend Jeff purchased it. I said, well, why didn't you? I said, now you tell me. Now you tell me that a guy died in his house.
Yeah, thanks.
I said, you really should have somebody come in if you believe that this is perhaps Mr. Green, or as I call him, Mr. Green Jeans, from the old Captain Kangaroo show here in the United States.
Oh, right.
There was a character called Mr. Green Jeans.
Yeah.
He was a friend of Captain Kangaroo.
I was like, why does that sound familiar?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I said, if you really believe this is Mr. Green Jeans, then you got to get somebody in here to move him on.
Yeah.
You got to move him along if you believe in this. I said, because I now believe that there's something here. And either you can, enjoy it and coexist with it, or bring somebody in to help move him along to, to transition into his next phase.
Yeah.
I said, because I said, this cannot be explained using science. There's something going on here. And sure enough, he brought somebody in. This is months and months and months later. He brought somebody in, and it was someone who had billed themselves as a psychic and as a cleanser. Apparently, this person got a lot of work in Washington, D.C. because a lot of these homes, were old and had survived, there's many traumas and many everythings, and there was like a lot of work. This person got a lot of work doing this, and sure enough, he had the house cleansed and done, and there was no more activity. The activity ceased.
Nice. What year did this happen again?
What year? This would have been 2005.
Okay. Yeah,
2005. So 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
wow. So when he said that you were crazy and didn't tell you that he had experiences, then you should have said something, or maybe you did. It's like, you call me crazy? Well, then you're crazy too, because you had these. Oh, wow.
I said to him, well, why didn't you tell, when you were calling me crazy, why didn't you fess up that you were experiencing things? He said, because I was in denial.
Yeah.
And
most
he said,
people.
When I heard you were experiencing things, I got scared.
Oh,
that this
yeah.
could really be real. Because if you, the stone-faced journalist, the skeptical science guy, was experiencing this, then that freaked me out, he said.
Yeah.
She said, so I went into deep denial.
Yeah. And, understandable.
He was extending this in his mind that, wow, what could happen here? He could wind up losing his house. He could wind up wanting to sell this house, which was going to be his dream house. And so he went into immediate denial. That's what motivated him. And I actually understood that.
I do too. Yeah.
I thought that was a very valid emotion that he expressed, a very valid action that he took. Action meaning no action for a long time. And that was valid. And I understood. I got that. I could see myself doing that as well. Trying to walk a mile in his moccasins, if you will.
Yeah.
And I could easily see myself doing that as well. I just made this huge investment in this house. It was my dream place. I was restoring it. And all of a sudden now I was going to be terrorized out of it? No way. I'm just not going to think about it. It'll go away. It'll go away.
Yeah, if you don't
And
think
it
about
didn't
it,
go
it's
away.
not there.
It didn't go away until he brought somebody in to make it go away.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it worked.
Good.
It
Does he
worked.
still live in the house?
No, he's since sold the house and moved to another city for another job.
Okay.
But I didn't ask if the new owners have experienced any activity. I don't think they have.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the very first. That was my very first brush with anything that I would consider to be unexplainable, paranormal, if you will.
Yeah.
Beyond normal, paranormal.
That's quite
And
the first experience, though.
it blew my mind. But things escalated. Things escalated for me. So, let's see, 2005. So, 4 years later. So there was a time then, a 4-year period of calm for me, where I, again, had no experiences whatsoever. None.
Mm-hmm.
But then, Kat, things escalated. And this is really intense. The story I'm about to tell you, I swear to you, happened to me. As God is my witness, this happened to me. And it was very, very disturbing. Because it involved me being part of the experience itself. And this will become clear to you as I tell you the story. So 4 years later, also in Washington, D.C., a lot of my friends live in D.C. I'm down there all the time working.
Yeah.
So you meet colleagues, do friends of friends, and whatever. I'm down covering congressional hearings on Capitol Hill, on science and space and NASA, and you just meet people, friends of friends, and that becomes your professional social group that you interact with, and then you become friends. So I had this friend who was renting a townhouse in a very nice neighborhood in Washington, D.C., in Northwest D.C., which is a very nice district where a lot of the government people and ambassadors and things live. And it was a beautiful home. And he had invited me on a Friday after work over to dinner at his place for a barbecue, on his back patio. And there were going to be other people there, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, yeah, I'd love to come. I'll be there after work. And I work out of a home office here up in the suburbs in the Maryland Mountains. So, after the rush hour was done on a Friday night, rush hour here is very bad in the DC area.
I can imagine.
Although now, with the whole Chinese virus, there is no traffic. So it's been amazing. But that's neither here nor there. So it was after rush hour on a Friday in 2009, and also in the summertime. I went down after work, just breezed right down the highway, right into DC. It was glorious on a Friday, and got to his place, and some people were already there. And, we had a really nice event, a cookout and some wine, and it was really, really nice. And it got to be the end of the evening, and people started tallying off. And he was a huge video gamer at the time, and he went by the initials JC. I always joke, what, Jesus Christ? But his name was Juan Carlos, and he went by JC. So JC is still a big video gamer. Doesn't live in this house anymore for reasons that will become clear to you when we're done with the story. And he said, hey, why don't you, people, we helped him clean up and stuff. And he said, hey, you want to play some video games? And I said, I'm not much of a gamer. I'm really bad. And if it's not Pac-Man, I'm lost. I'm just dating myself here, and I'm lost. He said, no, I'll teach you how to do this, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So as part of the key to the story, just know that we never got to playing video games. I'll just put that out there as a little tease for you.
Ooh. So
we're cleaning up, and we go from the back patio, outdoors, inside, in the kitchen. We're working, everything's cleaned up. It wasn't that big of a mess. It wasn't that many people. 6 people maybe. And I said, all right, I'll stay and play your silly video game. I think that's what I really did call it too, by the way. I think I said your silly video game. I'm not a gamer. So, well, he was a good guy, and he was, he had hosted me, and I said, all right. So But I said, be forewarned, I am so lame with a capital L that you're not gonna want to play video games with me because I'm so bad.
Yeah.
And he laughs. He goes, "Oh, no, I'll show you. So I said, fine. So we go into his den, and his den was upstairs at the bedroom level. This also was a townhouse, a row house. But it wasn't as old. It was maybe stemming from the 1970s, 1960s. So it was, and it didn't need to be, regentrified or anything. It was a really nicely appointed house that he rented. And so we go upstairs and we go into what would have been a bedroom of this house, but he had converted it into a den. Really, really nice. You'd love it. A big screen TV and a gaming console and the whole thing. And he says to me, and this is key now, these details I'm going to relate to you. He says, hey, it's kind of warm up here. Would you like a bottle of water? A cold bottle of water while we play. And I said, sure. And he says, I need to go downstairs to get it. I said, great, no problem. So he goes down the stairs to get the water. And I'm just sitting there, la la la. I don't even know how to turn this thing on. I'm not kidding you. This is how non-gamer literate I was. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sitting there, la la la, and he goes down to get a bottle of water. And then I'm just kind of looking around, and I glance out the door because I'm just looking around, just keeping myself occupied, and getting the lay of the land of this beautiful room he had, this den. And I look out at his bedroom door. And I see a woman running at full speed down the hallway. Up the stairs where he had just gone down the stairs. Mm-hmm. Up the stairs. And when you reach the top of the stairs, there's a landing and it turns 45 degrees. Like my other friend's house on the down part of the stairway where it turned 45 degrees. It says on the upward part of the staircase, it turns 45 degrees. And then it leads into a single hallway. You can't go any other way. It's a townhouse. Mm-hmm. And the hallway just, takes you to the various 3 bedrooms, the master bedroom and the 2 guest rooms, also a spare bathroom on that floor. And then the hallway literally dead ends into the back wall of the townhouse. You can't go anywhere. You can turn around and go back down the stairs or into the rooms. I turn and I see a woman, Kat. A woman. Full-bodied woman. Not transparent. Like if I had gone out of the den and touched her, I would have felt skin. Okay? It's a full-bodied woman. I later learned was a full-bodied apparition. Mm-hmm. At the time, I thought, oh my God, there's somebody in the house. And it was not one of the guests that had just left. Because this woman, how do I describe this to you? In the old Star Trek movies from the 1980s and 90s when they brought the series back in movie form?
Yes.
Do you remember when the Enterprise would go into warp speed? They would, to simulate warp speed, they would show the Enterprise take off and the back of the Enterprise would become blurry?
Yes.
To simulate speed. You remember that? Mm-hmm. The front of the Enterprise would be, high definition. In the back, it would be blurry and beautiful rainbow colors to show that it was, going to warp speed. That's what I saw on the back of this woman. So picture a woman running like the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah.
The back of her, and a full-bodied apparition, like I could touch her skin or shake her hand or hug her. But the back of her image was blurry like it was shedding light. Wow. Like that.
Yeah.
I saw that. And let me tell you exactly what this woman looked like. I can describe this to you in the most vivid terms because it made such an impression on me. And remember, journalists are trained to recount events. So, who, what, where, when, and why. The 5 W's. 5 W's of journalism. Who, what, where, when, and why. That's, if you can't tell that story, you can't report accurately. So I'm going to tell you what I saw without exaggeration using the 5 W's. Including, which are driven by my human senses.
Yeah.
I saw this woman. She looked like something from, I want to say, the early 1970s, kind of that early environmental movement, the back to nature movement. It was after the hippie movement of the 60s, but before disco hit. And there was a whole back to nature movement.
Mm-hmm.
Women wearing jumpers, and, kind of back to the farm look, a prairie look, Little House on the Prairie look. That was very prevalent here in the United States. I don't know if it was in Canada, but, getting back to basics and eating off the land, and, that whole early environmental movement.
Mm-hmm.
Was more gentle than the current environmental movement that we have, which is so radicalized and so toxic. This was, a gentle environmental movement. But a lot, people wore a lot of corduroy and a lot of jumpsuits and, jumpers and things like that.
Yeah, we did here in the 70s too.
Okay, so I want you to get that in your mind. A lot of earth tones, browns and oranges and olive green. And okay, she was wearing what looked like a 1970s jumper, like it looked like a German dirndl where it had straps on the top, and then it had like a drop waist.
Yep.
And it had like a 1970s floral pattern, but not vivid, in those browns and mustards and olive colors that kind of looked like flowers. And it looked like, I keep going back to corduroy. It looked like corduroy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like vertically striped fabric that you could touch and it would be, ridged.
Yep.
And she had copper hair, the color of a copper pot. And it was crimped using like a 1980s crimper.
Yeah.
Like you see that hairstyle.
Yep.
I mean, these are incredible details I'm relaying to you because they made such an impression on me.
And you're trained to remember detail too.
Yes, and I will tell you exactly who she looked like. Like, I think the best way to describe this is to say what famous person she may have resembled. Do you know the singer and actress and comedian Bette Midler?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Do you know in the 1980s, she did a lot of romantic comedies, a lot of rom-coms with a lot of famous people. She was like number one of the box office. These were romantic comedies. She did a series of them. One of them I remember vividly because it was such a funny movie called Ruthless People. If you're listening right now, want to Google, or as I prefer to say, internet search, I'm not necessarily a Google fan, internet search the film Ruthless People or Bette Midler Ruthless People and look at her. That is exactly who I saw. I'm not saying I saw Bette Midler, but I saw that archetype.
Wow.
That image. I saw Bette Midler from Ruthless People in a 1970s prairie dress, a jumper. Running at speed like you can't believe. Running, Kat, with the back of her body blurry, shedding light, and no sound, no smell, but a visual of this. And
That's
I saw
amazing.
her run up the stairs, turn the corner, and run toward the door of the den where I was waiting for my friend to come back up the stairs with a cold bottle of water so we could start playing these video games. I jumped out of my seat because I'm thinking this woman is either in trouble or we're being invaded. It's something criminal or she's being chased. I jump out and I go into the hallway. Now, this is a dead-end hallway. You look left and right. If you look to the right, you see the staircase. If you look to the left, you see a dead end. You see the wall of the townhouse. It's dead end. Well, you know where this is going.
Oh, yeah.
There's nobody there. There's nobody there. It's just completely gone, like nothing. And I am freaking out. And I start yelling, "Hey, JC, come up here, JC!" And he's got the two bottles, and he bounds up the stairs like a gazelle. And he turns the corner, and I'm white as a ghost, pardon the pun. I'm white as a ghost, and I just tell him what happened. And he just looks at me like I'm crazy. He said, "How much wine did you have to drink?" And I'm not a big drinker at all. I am not a big drinker. I think I had one glass of wine the entire night. Because I thought I was going to be driving home, very quickly as things end, and I don't drink and drive.
Right.
So I think I had one glass of white wine, and that was it. So I was completely in my senses. And he goes, I don't know what that is. He said, let's just play games. And I don't know, I just kind of went along with it. I didn't want to be all drama about this, so I just kind of dropped it. And it seems kind of strange in looking back now. That seems strange to me that I would just drop it, but I did. I just dropped it to be a good guest and to move on to these video games and whatever. I dropped it. Okay, so now here's the second part of the story. That is just whack biscuit. This is just craziness. And I'm looking at our time, so I'm going to try to do this quickly for you. But a month later, he invited me back to his place for another similar barbecue and video games thing. This time, just the two of us, not with any crowd or anything. He said, "What are you doing? I'm so bored. It's Friday. It's been a long week. Come on down. Get out of the suburbs. Come into the city. Blah blah blah." I said, "All right, Tracy, I will." Now it has been a month or two, a month and a half maybe, interval from the last time I was at his place, and as incredible as this may seem, I had forgotten about what had occurred there. Now that seems crazy that I would, but I did. I just chalked it up and thought, I don't know what I saw. I don't know what the whole thing was, but we played video games and I have since forgotten it. A month and a half has gone by. You get busy with your life, and
Exactly.
you don't obsess on it, and I put it out of my mind. So to make this very long ghost story short, I went back to his house, and something very, very, very disturbing and strange happened. And that is, the first part of the story that I just described to you, in great detail, happened as if I was in a time loop, happened exactly again.
Wow. Was it around the same time as well? Do you recall?
It was identical. It was like 7 p.m. on Friday evening after dinner. No alcohol involved this time. Not that it was a factor the first time. I'd only had one glass of wine. This time, no alcohol. Just dinner and Coca-Cola. So he says, "Hey, let's go up and play video games." And I'm not thinking anything about this. I say, "Okay." I start laughing because I said, "And remember how bad I am at video games?" He goes, "Yeah, I know." But you're the only one here, so I got you're the one I have to play video games with. I said, "Thanks a lot." So he was joking. So now press play on the video record. He says to me, "Hey, it's kind of hot up here.
No.
Would you like a cold bottle of water?" To which I say, "Yeah, that's a great idea." He says, "I have to go downstairs to get it." I said, "Okay, no problem." And he goes downstairs. Kat, I'm not even realizing that I'm a part of something that's being replayed verbatim at this point. I'm not even cognizant that I had that exact conversation with him in the exact place at the exact time a month and a half earlier. And I say to him, "Yeah, that would be nice. You know what's coming." I turn my head while I'm waiting for him to come back up the stairs, and you know who I see.
Yep.
I see the woman racing up the stairs, Cat, at speed like you can't believe, silently making no noise, up the staircase, turning the corner, down the hallway, shedding light off the back of her, looking like Bette Midler from 1973. And at this point now, my heart is beating a million miles an hour because I'm repeating something I had pre-lived, but chapter, rhyme, and verse. In other words, I am present, in the present, realizing, oh my God, I have done this before. But with not a single bit of it being different. Like I felt like I was being replayed. Like I was in somebody's movie and they had just pressed replay. And it's happening. Everything is happening identically. Hey, would you like a bottle of water? I answer, yes, that would be nice. I have to go down and get it in the kitchen. No problem, I'll be right here. The same conversation, everything. That was so strange. And I start screaming, JC, JC. He runs up, and I tell him again exactly what happened. And he says, it's strange that you're telling me this. He said, because since the first time you were here and had this experience,
Mm-hmm.
he said, I too now have begun to experience things here. He says,
Oh, wow.
he says, I've been touched on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I've been able to identify when it occurs. And it occurs, he says, it occurs, the activity ramps up when I'm in a rush to get out of the house. When I'm on schedule, I'm talking about JC now. When
Yes.
I'm on schedule, he tells me, and I need to get out of the house for work, but everything's happening, very slowly, and I'm right on time, and I'm being very leisure, and everything's working just as it should. Everything's fine. He says, when I'm running late, he says, that's when all these things start happening. He says, I feel like I'm being watched. Like someone is in the room with me, boring holes through my back with their eyes. He says, it's an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Yet there's nobody there in the room because he's getting ready for work. Some, mindless, nameless, Thursday morning in some month, in some year. And he said, and that's when I can't find my car keys. He says, I always find my car keys because I always put them in the same place and I can't find them. Or while I'm putting my dress shirt on and I'm buttoning it up, I suddenly feel a hand brush my shoulder. 5 distinct fingers. This is not me now, this is JC.
Yes.
5 distinct fingers going from the front of his shoulder, over the top of his shoulder, down his back, and then off. And I said to him, I want you to touch me right now the exact way that you feel it so that I can experience it through your eyes. And he did. He put his hands, barely touching his fingertips to my shoulder, from the front of my shoulder over the top, resting off the top, and back to the shoulder blade, and then off my back. I said, that's what it feels like? He said, exactly. That's what it feels like.
And
but it's only when he's in a rush, when he's running late or something has distracted him, or he's got to get out of the house. That's when the activity would ramp up. I said to him, you need to go down to the Department of Deeds in DC and research the real estate records for this house. I said, Here's why. I have a feeling somebody died in this house. And I have a feeling somebody died on that staircase. And I have a feeling it's somebody in the 1970s, a woman died on the staircase in the 1970s. I said, and by law, all deaths that occur in homes, for any reason, natural or crime, have to be recorded by law. They have to be reported to future home buyers.
Oh, it has to be reported as well.
Yes, in DC. In DC,
okay.
Not in all jurisdictions in the United States, but in DC, it happens to, if somebody has died in your home, for whatever reason, it could be, natural causes, it could be old age.
Yeah.
It has to be reported. But, especially if it was a crime, something traumatic, something trauma, it has to be reported. I said, do me a favor. When you get a moment, go down to the DC department and do this. Please just do this. I need to have my curiosity satiated here.
Yes.
And he promised me he would. And guess what?
Did he?
He did.
Oh, good. What did he find out?
Guess what?
You were right.
A woman died in that house in the 1970s from
Wow.
a freak accident on that staircase. She broke her neck.
She probably tripped?
And died.
Yeah.
She tripped, she broke her neck, and she died.
Wow.
In the house. God rest her soul.
That's
and
amazing.
I said to him, she's still there. She's stuck in a loop. And I know that loop. I know that loop because I lived part of that loop with her.
Yep.
I don't know how I wound up in that loop, but I lived a loop that really freaked me out. It happened twice to me with that woman identically in the same situation, in the same house, with the same person, in the same circumstance. How bizarre is that?
He had never encountered anything that he recalls in that house before that moment you had that experience the first time?
Never.
Wow.
Never. It was shortly after that he did the research on the house. Remember, he was just a renter.
Right.
That he moved out of that house. And he lives now in the DC area, just outside DC, over the border in Maryland now. But, I mean, that was creepy. That was very creepy. And for me to have played a part of that, and then I felt, Kat, on the second time, I felt like I was in a movie. I was in somebody's movie that somebody had pressed play on their old VCR. And there I was, held hostage to this story.
A real life Groundhog Day.
A real life Groundhog Day, but I was an active participant in it. Not voluntarily. I was an involuntary active participant in this movie. Kat, I was even saying the same words that I said the first time.
That's
I was
amazing.
saying the same words.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'd like a cold bottle of water. Oh, I'll be right back. No problem. I mean, it was freaking me out. Well, I never went back to that house.
Really?
Nope. I never went back to that house. Not because I didn't want to see or experience the paranormal. You know, by this point in my life, I had all these experiences that I was very open-minded to it. You know, I had started researching it online. I had started participating in paranormal radio shows like yours online, and you know, I had now had a very, very open mind. Still not being to explain any of it using the scientific method, but keeping an open mind because I know for a fact what I experienced. Clear-eyed, clear-minded experiences. And that second experience where I felt like I was being involuntarily compelled to play out this experience, I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And I couldn't explain it, and it disturbed me, and I didn't want any part of it again. You know, if I could have been there as a witness and seen this woman run up the staircase and had some other interaction in some other way, I would have been open to go back to the house. But I felt like I was a part of the story, and I was being compelled to be in this movie that played out chapter, line, and verse, even the same syllables and words and sentences. That I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. Yeah. That was just too bizarre by a half for me.
For whatever reason, you triggered that when you entered the house. And do you find ever since you had your very first experience when you were helping renovate the your Jeff was his name?
Yeah, Jeff's townhouse.
Yeah. Do you find since then that more things happen? You're more aware now of paranormal? Yes. Yeah. That usually happens.
But what I try to do, and this is really important as somebody who's a journalist and somebody, you know, who has associated with scientists, literally rocket scientists, literally rocket scientists, all of my professional career, I still attempt to debunk everything that happens to me, and everything that I've seen since then, like seeing shadow people, which I've done, and hearing knocks. I hear a lot of knocks all the time, in multiple venues, including my own home, but including in public places and in weird places where I shouldn't be hearing knocks. I will hear them. And I've researched, you know, what knocks can mean. And you know, there are different theories on what they are. There are positive theories and there are negative theories. There are theories that are, you know, not so nice. I tend to want to ascribe to the nice theories, of course, and what these knocks mean. I've consulted with people who are mediums and who are empaths, and you know, dared to describe these stories to them at the risk of being made fun of or being, you know, trivialized or minimalized. I've gone out on a limb and shared some of these stories with some of these
people who I now believe are psychics or empaths, and they've really helped me to come to terms with what's going on, with what could be real and what can be explainable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I largely, in my experience, I can only speak in my experience now, I'm pretty well satisfied that for me, that shadow people do not exist, that they can be explained using psychology and using biology. And I
Really?
think that, yeah, in my mind, I have solved the shadow people um, uh, phenomenon. And I
Well,
now believe that it doesn't exist, that it can be explained very easily. I've talked to psychologists, I've talked to optical doctors, opticians, and
mm-hmm.
ophthalmologists, and I think I now know what shadow people are. And there's a real time science explanation for it. Do you want me to share briefly what I think it is?
Yes, please.
Okay, so because I don't want to keep you long, and I know that you like to keep it to an hour, but
Oh, if yeah, I have the time. If you have the time,
okay, good. Well, I have the time.
okay.
So, you know, we've all had those experiences of seeing shadow people, but for most people, based on my research of this, it happens while you're turning your head. Like, very rarely will you be looking straight forward and see a shadow figure to your left or to your right in your
Mm-hmm.
peripheral vision with a still head. It almost always involves some type of movement on the part of you, the person who's experiencing the shadow person.
Mm-hmm.
The overwhelming number of cases involve moving of the head. And so with that as a background, and you know, as a journalist and as somebody who deals with science, I try to identify patterns that are replicated to help explain the phenomenon. And one of the patterns is head movement. And so when I spoke to some psychologists about this, and a friend of mine who's an optical doctor, they explained to me that this is a very, very common phenomenon. And this is what it is. The brain is such a fast computer. Our brains are such immensely quick computational devices
Mm-hmm.
that our brain outpaces, I'll say this a different way. The speed at which our brain processes things outpaces the ability for the brain to accept the data. So, in other words, if you've ever seen a distant thunderstorm, you
Mm-hmm.
see the lightning and you may not hear the thunder for a long time. Why
Mm-hmm.
is that? Because the speed of light travels faster than the speed
Then
of sound.
Yep.
Right? So you have that delay. Or, for instance, when I go down to Cape Canaveral and I watch a rocket launch, one of Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets, a Falcon 9,
Mm.
and, you're for safety purposes, they have you in a viewing range, well downstream from where the actual rocket is taking off, in case there's, an explosion or something, which I've seen. It's always bizarre because you see the rocket ignite and it's silent. It's absolutely silent. And then a number of seconds later, you feel the rocket in your chest.
Yeah.
The sound of the rocket reaches you and you can feel boom, 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 on your body the sheer power of the thrust of the rocket that's fighting gravity. It's this great battle that's occurring. Gravity is doing everything it can to keep that rocket on a launch pad, and that rocket is doing everything it can to overcome the forces of gravity to go into space. That's what's happening. Well, in our brains, it was described to me by this optical surgeon friend of mine. The optical nerve brings in and processes imagery at a slight slower speed than the brain is ready to accept it. In other words, our brain is a supercomputer, and it's ready to go. I mean, it is ready to go. And our eyes can only take things in at a certain speed. And that speed happens to be just slightly slower. Just to really dumb this down here,
Mm-hmm.
It's a half beat. It's not really a half beat, but to explain this is the way it was explained to me. It's a half beat slower than the brain. So
Okay.
our brain is the supercomputer, and our eyes are a little bit less than a supercomputer, just a little bit less. So as we turn our eyes, and our eyes are gathering data, are gathering imagery, which is optical,
Uh-huh.
it's being processed by a chemical electrical brain, which is more efficient. Chemical electrons are more efficient than optical electrons. So that creates that half a beat of delay. So what our brains do, our nominal functioning brains. So I don't want to sound judgmental here. There's no judgment implied here, but brains that are operating as they should nominally. It's called nominally. They will insert imagery into the missing holes that our eyes are not providing. If our brains didn't do that, we would go crazy. You would have your brain providing you with analysis that had holes in it, and that's not acceptable to our being. So a brain which is receiving optical imagery, like, oh, look at that beautiful waterfall. Oh, look at that lightning. Look at this rocket launch. Oh, look at this love story on TV. Look at this funny Bette Midler movie from the 80s. Our brain is providing us all this explanation of what we're seeing. But because the brain moves faster than what we see, like light versus sound, our brain will insert placeholders there that our optical imagery can't provide for it. Does this make sense at all?
Yes, it does.
So your eyes are providing a product to the brain, and it's providing 98% of what it's seeing. But the brain won't accept 98%. Our brains, as long as they're nominal, we require 100% all the time. There is no margin of error. So when there is a bit of corrupted data that is not delivered to our brains created it, fills in the space, so that you're always at 100%. The brain is always at 100%, regardless of the inputs that it's receiving from your sense of taste, or smell, or sight, or touch. It needs 100%, 100% of the time. It was described to me by this surgeon. So oftentimes it will insert something that's familiar, which is in our brains, in human beings, the human form. That's a very friendly, very common, very non-threatening image. But it doesn't need to create in our peripheral vision an entire person, full-bodied person. It often would just put the silhouette of a very friendly figure, something that is common, that we see a lot, which is human beings, which is our own form. So as you're turning your head and your optical nerve is inputting, it's just importing massive amounts of data, your brain is already there. Your brain has been there and done that already. And 98% of what you just quote unquote saw has been now processed by your brain. But your brain did it at such a speed that it was slightly faster than the optical nerve could deliver. So it got 98% of the picture, but there's 2% on the wings, left and right wings, that your eyes didn't provide to the brain, because that's just not fast enough. The eyes aren't fast enough. So the brain inserts a placeholder when that needs to occur. And it doesn't need to occur all the time. But when it does need to occur, when there's a data loss, when it's, the umpleak has corrupted some data, the brain says, no problem, got you covered. Boom. And it places shadows there.
I've never heard it explained that way. That's fascinating.
Right, and it's just, but I was told by both this psychologist and my friend who's a optical surgeon, is if the brain didn't do that, we would go crazy.
So how would
we would become schizophrenic. We would become, we would start having all kinds of issues, emotional issues, brain issues, things that would, psychological issues. A lot of people who have these afflictions, whether it's schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever, it's because their brain lacks a certain chemical.
Yes.
We now know this. That's why, so many medications are so successful to treat people now. The people who, through no fault of their own, their brain just doesn't make a sufficient amount of chemical the way other brains do. They're not bad brains. They're not broken brains. They're just different brains. They're not nominal. They're slightly not nominal. Notice I'm not saying normal. I'm saying nominal. And those brains, through no fault of their own, don't manufacture enough of a certain chemical. We now have that chemical that we can give these people, thank goodness, in the form of pharmaceuticals that replenishes or tops off the chemical that are in these brains. That's why people who are, schizophrenia and bipolar is highly treatable now. And so we're so lucky to have that now, that it can make, we can artificially make those brains nominal again. And guess what happens when that happens? The shadow people disappear.
So how would you explain, though, that some of these people who see shadow people and they say they see red glowing eyes, or they're holding a timepiece or something like that? Is it their brain still filling in the blanks?
I don't know. It's beyond my pay grade to know. I don't know. The way I define shadow people are very fleeting images. As you're turning your head, you think you see something and you do a double take.
Yep.
You do a spit take, like, what? And you look back and there's nothing there.
Yep.
That's my definition of shadow people.
Okay, gotcha. I've seen that countless times.
These images that are constant in front of you, blah, blah, blah. That could be something totally different. To me, that's not the pure definition of a shadow person.
Gotcha. Okay.
A shadow person to me is something where you see something fleeting, you're turning your head, and it's gone. It's instantaneously gone. And you look and it's not there. It's because your brain inserted it there.
Okay.
For a nanosecond to keep you sane. If not, if your brain doesn't do that, you have a non-functioning brain of that 2%, and that's enough to cause you to go insane.
Or here's a crazy thought. Maybe when we turn our heads to look at it, so we wouldn't go crazy, we don't see those things, that they could still be there. But that's just a crazy thought.
Well, yeah, that's where science and data crosses over to belief. You cross the Rubicon to the paranormal. See, what I'm saying is I'm satisfied, and I'm only speaking now for me.
Yes.
I'm satisfied now that science and psychology can explain shadow people up to what you just described.
Okay.
When you get to the point that you just said, well, maybe they're still there, and we're just not seeing it, that we were given a glimpse into some multiverse or something. We were given a blessed glimpse into the next dimension. That, to me, can't be proven currently with science. So that now becomes belief. Right? You transfer from belief, from science to belief.
Yes.
In other words, an optical surgeon using surgical techniques and medications can create shadow people for you. They can create them. They can make you think they're there, but they're not. We're using science and pharmaceuticals to produce them.
Right.
Or, in this case, to remove them. That can be proven. We can test it. We can give you a shadow person if you want one.
No thanks.
And then we can take it away just as easily. Boom, it's there. That's science. That's manipulation of the optical nerve and how it connects to the brain. That's explainable now. We can replicate it in the surgery room. We can replicate it in computer models. We can show exactly how it happened. when you posit a theory that, well, what we really saw was a glimpse into another multiverse or another dimension, well, that becomes belief.
Mhm.
That becomes a theory. It's a theory, but it's not fact. It's a theory. But in fact, my optical surgeon friend can give you a shadow person if you want one for a short time, using science, using a technique. That's fact. Multiverse and a glimpse into something else, that's a theory. I'm not discrediting it. I'm just saying it's a theory.
Mhm.
There's a difference between fact and religion.
This reminds me of a paper on infrasound that was written called Ghost in the Machine. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I'll send that to you. I think it was written the late 90s. I'm trying to remember who published it. It was in the Journal of... I can't remember. Vic Tandy, I think, was the author. Anyways, I'm just going to give you the cliff notes here. He was working in this lab, and everyone said it was haunted, and he would see... people would say they would see things from the corner of their eyes, and they would have feelings of foreboding, and and when they saw the black spots from the corner of their eye and they turn it would be gone. So they believed it was haunted. Well, he found out about a thing called infrasound, and it was. I take it you're familiar with infrasound, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yes. And you know how it can wreak havoc on the human body. And that's what it was. It was a big fan at the other end of the lab that was off kilter just slightly. If memory serves, that was the reason why. And anyways, it was just simply infrasound. And once they fixed that, they didn't see the, haunting anymore. But I'll send you that paper. It's very fascinating read.
Oh yeah, I will definitely read that, because see, I think that as with all things paranormal, based on my research and using reason and not emotion, based on using the gift of reason,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, and this gets my paranormal friends very angry with me. I believe an overwhelming number of paranormal encounters can be explained using science and reason and investigation. Knowledge that we have can be explained in, unfortunately, very pedestrian terms. Well, like you just said, it was a fan that was oscillating at a certain sound that was causing this in this lab. That's not sexy. That's not fun.
No.
That's kind of a downer, but it's the truth.
Yep.
And we have to embrace the truth. We have to embrace reason. We are all products and descendants of the Enlightenment. And we're not living in the Dark Ages anymore. And, when there is an explanation that is clearly there, that can be replicated, that can be explained using science and reason, we need to embrace it. Mm-hmm. Even though it's not fun. It's not as fun as, having a spooky explanation.
Exactly.
But I do believe that there's a certain percentage, albeit very small percentage, that cannot be explained using science and reason,
mm-hmm.
technology and equations and supercomputers. It just can't be explained. And we have to be open-minded to that. And that's where I like to prod my scientific friends who get mad at me for saying this. People get mad at me no matter what. Either my paranormal friends get mad at me because, I try to explain things away that they hold so dear, or my science friends get mad at me because, I'm dealing in voodoo and, spooky stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, I can't win for losing here. But, I believe that if I had to put a percentage on it, and everybody's percentage would be different, so I'm just giving you the Dave percentage.
Yes.
I believe 98% of everything that we think is paranormal is not and can be explained using the brain and science and manipulation and supercomputing and evolved knowledge, just, physics and quantum physics. I think it can be explained. But I'm telling you, there is 2% out there that just is baffling.
Yep.
And, in quiet moments, Kat, over a dinner with maybe a full bottle of wine, I can get my scientific friends in very hushed tones and whispers. These are rocket scientists, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are atheists, mind you. They're very secular people. I can get them over a bottle of wine to admit that they too believe in the paranormal. They will never say it in public.
Yep.
They would threaten to kill me if I ever if I ever reveal their names. They would deny that they ever said it. But over a bottle of wine, in a vulnerable moment, even the most scientific, rigid people, I can get them to admit to experiences they may have had, or at least they believe that their cherished science cannot explain 2% of what's out there.
Exactly. And like I stated several times before, I'm a huge believer, but I'm also a skeptic because I want to know, I want to look beyond what's going on.
Well, something that you said either earlier in this conversation or prior to us going on the air, you said, 100 years ago, things that would have been classified as paranormal are no longer paranormal because we now have detection devices and explanations and knowledge and science and reason to explain it, and it has become very mainstream. And those things are no longer paranormal. So 100 years from now, things that we classify as paranormal, could they potentially be explained by our science 100 years from now? Our supercomputers 100 years from now? Yes, probably so. But will there still be things that can't be explained 100 years from now?
For sure.
My guess is yes.
Yeah. I think, and maybe science in the future will prove that there are other dimensions and realities, and we are actually, in fact, seeing ghosts, but they're known as a different name, but that's how we see them. So who can say?
I'm looking forward to the time when an astronaut or a cosmonaut or a Chinese astronaut or a Japanese astronaut comes forward in their retirement years to say that they had experiences in space. I'm not talking about UFOs.
Nope.
I'm talking about ghost apparition type things like on the space station, in the future moon base, on our future base on Mars. I'm not talking about UFOs and aliens. I'm talking about, did things happen in space? Did you ever see something in the space station?
I know. I'm dying to know.
I'm just wondering if there are already experiences that are being kept from us for whatever reason. And believe me when I tell you, I have asked astronauts these questions every time I see them. I've had the pleasure of meeting many, many, many astronauts. And it's one of the questions I always ask them. It's usually on the side, quietly, not in a press conference or anything. But when I have them on the side along the wall of a room, and I'm talking with them, and we're kind of getting friendly with each other and feeling, an element of trust there, I always ask them, and not one has ever said yes. Not one. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It could be they're too afraid to say it because they'll be shamed if they do. They'll be made fun of by the astronaut corps, their peer group. That could very well be a part of this. I don't know. I might be projecting there, and maybe there truly is nothing. Maybe there is nothing that has ever happened in space.
Maybe it's just
paranormal.
Maybe it's just terrestrial. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're not afraid to speak. Maybe there is nothing to tell. That's possible. But boy, would I love to hear it.
As would I. Wow.
If it's happening here and is part of the human consciousness, why wouldn't it happen in low Earth orbit? They're only 200 miles above us. 200 miles, that's not far.
Not really, no.
From where I am in Washington, that's, just a little bit beyond New York, DC to New York. I mean, it's not far.
Yeah.
So they're not that far up there. We think of them being in outer space. They're not in outer space. They're in near space. So if things are happening down here, that 2%, that I believe is 2%, some people would say it's 20%. I don't believe that. But the 2% that we can't explain using current knowledge, why wouldn't it be happening 200 miles away? Why? It's not that far. I mean, 200 miles is not far.
Maybe it has something to do with electromagnetic fields. There's a lot of factors that you could add into there.
Yeah, exactly. And if it is happening, why aren't we being told?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why is the governments, European governments, Chinese government, Russian government, the United States government, NASA, why aren't we being told? If there's something happening on the space station occasionally, once a year maybe, but that's very, very strange, why are we being told? What's the agenda there? If there is an agenda, what is it? I don't know.
That would be a whole different topic.
Yeah, exactly. But as a space journalist, just rest assured that I do ask them every single time.
Well, it's
Never in
refreshing to
public.
know that you ask.
Yes. I never ask them in public because they'll never say it in public.
Oh, exactly.
No. But I do, in quiet moments on the QT, I do ask them, and they deny. So
Let's hope someday someone will admit it. It's almost like when people tell you that they don't believe in the paranormal at all, and then they find out that, I do investigations, I have a paranormal talk show, and they'll say, well, there was this one time. So hopefully this will happen to you sometime.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, if I ever get anybody to confirm anything, even on the QT, you'll be the first one to know. I'll come back and we'll do a show.
Yes, that would be awesome. We could probably go all day just talk. Like, I hope you'll come on again because you have so many interesting encounters and stories, and this is really, really a good episode. They're all good episodes in my opinion, but sometimes people get a little bit more in depth, and I really like that.
Oh, good. Well, I was happy to do so, and like I said, I was just so honored to be on your show. Ever since you launched it, I was secretly hoping you'd invite me.
Oh, really? Oh, wow! I didn't know that. You should have spoke up.
I've listened so many times. I was like, I got to get on there and tell my stories.
You should have said something. I know you are, but
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's been over an hour and a half. So
I'm sorry to take up so much time.
Oh, it's okay. Like I said, we could have gone on and on and on. I've had one interview one time and went over 2 hours. My friend Cisco Murdoch knows how to talk, and she does it well.
Well, I'm happy that I did not break her record. I want her to keep that record.
No, so far my sister, my paranormal sister, Cisco, has that gold medal.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm in good company then.
Indeed.
Awesome.
So
well, thank you so much. I appreciated being on your show.
I appreciate it as well.
Me on Twitter, I'm at Germantown Runner, without the R on the end. Twitter doesn't let me have it; it's too long. So at Germantown Runner. And anybody can feel free to contact me, and if they have anything they want to relay or stories to tell, or they want further clarification, I'm happy to help them.
Awesome. And as always, when this gets released in the show notes, I will post links so they won't have to worry that they're misspelling something. They can just click on the link and it'll take them right there. Oh,
I'll use the link myself. I misspell it all the time.
I do that with my email, Paranormal Heart, all the time. I can never, maybe I should have come up with something easier to type. I don't know, but I really have to watch.
It's very identifiable. I mean, there's only one Paranormal Heart out there, so you've stumbled on a very good brand.
Thank you.
Brand.
That's because of my good friend, John Mallard, not related to Jim, but they are good friends. When I first started this, I had a real difficult time trying to come up with a name, and him and I were bouncing back ideas, and he came up with Paranormal Heart, and I really liked it. So.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I love the logo. I love everything about it. So keep up your good work, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, we will for sure. So if you can just hang tight for a sec, and then we'll just have a couple of words. But I will say farewell, and I'll chat with you in the duck pond on Tuesday.
That sounds great.
Take care.
Happy Canada Day.
Thank you.
we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to purpleplanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.